Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books, where today we're going to be talking about Tim Power's 1979 novel, The Drawing of the Dark, a historical fantasy novel about the Siege of Vienna, with the emphasis being heavily upon fantasy historical novel, with the emphasis on fantasy. So 1979, Tim Power's Drawing the Dark. I had not heard about Tim Powers until recently when I read his book, The Anubis Gates, which is from 1983, which won the Philip K. Dick Award. And that is an excellent, excellent fantasy novel, which is also a bit of a historical bent to it, about ancient Egyptian priests, time travel, werewolves, doppelgangers in 1800s London. I did a full video on it. I will link that down in the description below. I encourage you to go check it out. It's a wonderful book. So when I saw Tim Powers' Drawing in the Dark in a used bookstore not that long ago, I had to snatch it up and go through and read it and see if it was every bit as good as the Anubis Gates, or if it wasn't. And we'll answer that question here by the end of this video. So this book, 1979, I'll read you the back blurb off of it to give you a little bit of a flavor of what you're getting into. Too many legends. Brian Duffy, aging soldier of fortune, had been hired in Venice by a strange old man who called himself Aurelianus Ambrosius. He was supposed to go to Vienna and act as a bouncer at an inn where the fabulous Herzfesten beer was brewed. That was clear enough. But why was he guided and guarded on the trip by creatures from the ancient legends? Why should he be attacked by Afrits and saved by mythical dwarfs? What was so important about the Herzfesten beer to the Fisher King, whoever he was? Why was Duffy plagued by visions of a sword and an arm rising from a lake? And what had a bunch of drunken ancient Vikings to do with it all? Then there was no time for speculation as Vienna was besieged by the Turkish armies of Suleiman. Duffy found himself drawn into a war of desperation and magic. It was up to him to preserve the West until the Drawing of the Dark. And that's what you've got. You've got this extreme fantasy novel, and the title, Drawing of the Dark, here refers to the dark Bock Herzfesten beer at the Herzfesten Brewery in Vienna. And it turns out that this beer is the spiritual heart of the Western civilization. This brewery has been there for thousands of years. It is the spiritual chakra and heart and center of the Western culture. And it's this mythical beer that gets drawn every 700 years from this mythical, magical vat that has been invested with the spirit of Finn Mac Cool. And if they can draw this beer on time, it can only be drawn at exactly every 700 years. It will revitalize Western civilization. And that is why Suleiman is attacking the city of Vienna, not to take the city, but to stop the Drawing of the Dark. And Suleiman is only a tool. He's just the puppet of his vizier, who is Ibrahim. And Ibrahim is a wizard, an exceptionally powerful wizard of the East, who is dead set on stopping the Drawing of the Dark. And so Brian Duffy, our hero, an Irish wandering mercenary, has been hired to go to Vienna to be a bouncer at this bar in order to let it be preserved, to preserve the inn and the brewery until such time as they can draw the dark and revitalize the West and revitalize the Fisher King. And Brian Duffy is our hero. He's our reluctant hero. He's a hero with a hidden identity that is so well hidden that he himself doesn't know it. and it's a great story. It starts off with a bang. The fact that Tim Powers has created the spiritual heart of the West as a dark Bock beer in a brewery, I think is just absolutely hysterical. It's a great little plot twist that I really enjoyed. And the book just has a ton of elements in it, fantasy elements, as Duffy travels from Venice in order to get to Vienna and then becomes the bouncer of this bar where you've got Vikings hanging out that have come down the Danube River, and you've got all these mercenaries and you've got all this action happening. And it starts off just wonderfully. It's really good. However, then at that point, you have the Siege of Vienna. And with the Siege of Vienna, the book takes a different turn. And I was hoping that once the siege started, once the city was invested by the Turks, that you would get sort of a Swords of the Thunder feel to it, that Timothy Powers would go all Robert E. Howard's Swords of the Thunder, in particular the story Wings of the Vulture, or Shadow of the Vulture, I should say, which is all about the Siege of Vienna with Red Sonja and the German knight von Kalmbach. I thought that was the direction he was going to go, with just a heavy dose of sorcery and magic thrown into it. But unfortunately, you don't get that. You get the sorcery and the magic, but once the siege happens, the book takes, no pun intended, a dark turn. The darkness gets drawn out into the foreground of the book, and it loses its mood. It loses that lighthearted, and just fun character that it has at the start of the book. And it starts to bog down. And the plot starts to break down as well. The different plot threads just start to sort of come unglued. He doesn't hold them together. And in addition to that, you have a tragic event that happens to one of the love interests in the book. And it just falls flat, this tragic event, because it has no weight. And it has no weight because Tim Powers didn't bother to build up this character to whom this tragic event happens. And in the book, unfortunately, it just sort of spins apart aimlessly, and it has this very dark mood that descends over it that dampens out all of that the fun that he had going on, that fun fantasy adventure in the front half of the novel. And unfortunately, it sputters out. So that is the book. I can't wholeheartedly recommend it. The front half is good. The second half is not that good. The cover art is pretty decent. The cover art is by Doug Beekman, and it depicts a scene out of the book that has a lot of fantasy elements that appear in his later novel, the Anubis Gates, such as you've got winged gargoyles, but if you notice, the winged gargoyle is wearing wooden clogs on its feet. And that's because in Tim Powers' books, if mythical creatures, if goblins and gargoyles and creatures who use magic, if their feet touch the earth, if they touch dirt, they lose their powers. And the hero here, Brian Duffy, is dragging a sword along the ground. And that's another feature in Tim Powers' books, is if the heroes will take iron chains or some type of iron and drag it along the ground because it grounds them from magical spells. So Brian Duffy is dragging his sword along the ground in order to protect himself from the spells of the gargoyles here, as the gargoyles have got their wooden clogs in their feet in order to protect them from losing their powers. Unfortunately, I think Mr. Beekman has taken a little bit of artistic liberty, and the sword is actually all in flames like a sword of a Balrog. But in the book, it's just throwing sparks because he's dragging it over the cobblestones. Also, Mr. Beekman has turned our hero into a Elric lookalike. And I think that might have been at the direction of the publisher. They might have said, hey, make him look like Elric, give him all white hair, even though he's only got sort of graying hair in the book. Make it all white so it looks like Elric, and maybe we'll get a little extra sales out of it. But that's it, The Drawing of the Dark. I can't recommend it. It starts off fantastic. I had a lot of high hopes for it. I was drawn into the book. It really had me going. And then you have the Siege of Vienna, and everything just kind of comes unglued, and a sort of a dark pall, a dark mood settles over the book, and then the plot threads break apart. And unfortunately, Tim Powers can't sustain it to the end. However, if you do come across the Anubis Gates by Tim Powers, I do highly recommend that. That's an excellent book. Go down, check out my review down in the description of the Anubis Gates. That is a fantastic book by Tim Powers. But that's it. I'm going to wrap this one up. This is Grammaticus saying take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time.